But tonight, a rule of thumb for retirement savings used by many of us may do more harm than good for your bottom line. We're covering your assets tonight with Wesley Wood, president of Wood Financial Group, Doug Flynn, partner and co-founder of Flynn Zito Capital Management, and Veronica Dagher, reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Welcome all. Doug, I'll start with you. So the 4% rule is essentially that's how much money you can take out of your retirement savings as you tap that money. Right. Not more than 4%, not less than 4%, but 4% every year. And now people are starting to say that's crazy. Why?
Well, that was a guide that, back in the day when you could get 6% on your government bonds, a mix of 50-50 stocks and bonds would give you about that kind of return that you could take out safely and give yourself a little bit of an inflation
still grow,
raise.
Right?
Yeah, a little bit of inflation and still have the money, we call it capital retention, for the rest of your life. But with interest rates very low now, a lot of people are questioning whether a 4% rule is reasonable.
Veronica, you talk to financial advisors all the time. Is everybody off this? And, if you don't let me take out 4%, you're only going to let me take out 3%. Don't I have to have a lot more money?
Right. You need a lot more money. So this 4% rule doesn't account for someone who has got a really small portfolio. Not to mention market movements. Say you take 4% out in a really down year. That's going to really dent your pot of money that you have to retire on. Not to mention it doesn't account for long-term events. If you take out 10% one year because of a major health event, that's going to leave you less in the long term. So you want to adjust the amount you're going to take out in future years.
Very, very smart. Wesley, to you. I think people look at this and they think, well, doesn't this all depend on what I'm making in my account, right? How well am I doing? How well are my bonds treating me? When you look out into the future, what do you see for that side of the portfolio? What kind of growth do you expect?
Well, not necessarily, because a lot of people do believe if they made money over the last, let's just say, 10 years and perhaps they average 6 or 7% on their portfolio, that's okay and all, but when they start taking income out of retirement, you can't just look at your average rate of returns of 6, 7% and say, I can pull that kind of income out. Because in a volatile market, if the stock market were to go down and you take out a much larger percentage of your assets, there's a real chance of perhaps cratering that account.
Okay, I hear the warnings. The cold wind is blowing across my desk, Doug. So what should be the general rule then? If not 4%, what?
Yeah, well, we say that 3% is the new 4% is kind of the oversimplified version of that, but really it comes down to your own personal situation. I think what a lot of people do is they start off with a particular amount of money they think they need, and they don't really adapt to if they have extra or if they have a down year, they don't cut back. They want that amount of money every year because that's their lifestyle. And the thing they don't plan for are things like big ticket items, like they don't think about the next new car that they're going to need 8 or 9 years into retirement.
It's hard to have all that in your head, though, Veronica. I mean, the reality is you can't really predict the health issues you're going to face, and there are lots of other expenses, too.
That's right. You can't predict a lot, but there's a few things you can predict, or at least have some control over, which is the amount of debt you're carrying into retirement. If you're carrying in high interest credit card debt, you really want to work to eliminate that. If you're carrying in a mortgage, you really want to get that down to zero.
Even if it's not high rate, right?
Even if it's not high rate, because that's really going to drag on your investments and drag on what you have left to tap for retirement.
So, Wesley, I want to switch up the topic here a little bit because there's been a big debate going on recently about whether investors, particularly people who are in retirement, should use actively managed funds or whether they should buy index funds or ETFs where they're taking no manager risk. What's your favorite answer to the question?
Well, my favorite answer is you want to look at where your money is when you're in retirement. If you're going to be taking money out of those types of investments, you want to make sure that you've got the distribution or the yield to sustain those kind of withdrawals. Because looking at managed money funds, they haven't done quite as well as the S&P index as some of those not as actively managed accounts.
Is that your vote?
If you're taking money out of retirement accounts, I'd probably be even more safe than that. If you're going to look at those, you can look at individual bonds holding to maturity, preferred stocks that you're going to hold to maturity instead of those index funds.
So, Doug, to you, okay, let's say you're not in retirement right now and you're trying to build that nest egg. You want to get the biggest nest egg you can, right? Sure. You're setting aside as much money as you can. Right. But should you be in active funds? Should you be in index funds? Sure. Should you have a mix of both?
Well, we're what we call agnostic to that active-passive debate. It comes down to the individual manager. There are managers that do bring value. They may be few and far between, but there are times when they bring more value than others. There are times when active managers might outperform maybe as much as 50%, but most of the time they only outperform 20% of the time. But if you learn how to get into that 20 or 50% of the time, some of those managers bring value in certain areas, maybe not in the large cap, blend category, but in other areas where there are discrepancies, you can find managers that do. So I don't have a preference one way or the other. It's about what's going to bring the best overall portfolio return for the risk level the client wants to take.
Veronica, last word.
Well, I think one of the things that really eats into investors' portfolio is the fees. And if you're looking at fees purely, passive is probably your better bet. Depends on the situation, but over the time, the amount of fees that people pay out really hurts their long-term retirement security.
And the debate rages on right here on the Willis Report. Wesley, Doug, and Veronica, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And still to come, my 2 cents more. And next, school districts from Minnesota to South Dakota taking early snow days, as residents in the Midwest face heavy snow and plunging temperatures with the rest of the country. What you should expect coming up after the break.
I'm nationwide. Yes, I've been in your home.